Hey, everybody. Once again, this is Micah Lieberman with Scope and the Voices of Scope. And I get to do these fun interviews with just interesting people doing great work in clinical research, and many of them are longtime faculty of my conference, and it's great. So today I have Sam Rogers. Your current title, Sam, is Director of Patient Engagement and Patient-Centered Innovation at Raven, RA Ventures, which is cool because I know you more from your past jobs at Takeda
Mhm.
and Moderna and Shire when you were inside of ClinOps in patient recruitment and stuff like that. So it's really interesting how you made that transition. And you're also a judge this year on the Participant Engagement Award. So welcome, Sam. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thanks so much. So excited to be here.
Hey, so by the way, we're going to talk about kind of some of the things we're seeing. You're unusual. Thank you for being a judge, by the way. I would ask you, why did you do it? But I know why you did it because I made you. But I think something interesting is your new job, your job title, you kind of switched. You're still analyzing biotech and pharma and technology. But when you look at our judging panel, you're a little bit unique with your new
Yeah.
affiliation at RA Ventures. So tell us a little bit about that transition.
Yeah, it's been quite interesting because, like you said, I've always been on the sponsor side for the most part. I did briefly spend some time at an agency, but the last 10 plus years, I've been in-house as patient recruitment at various sponsors. And so now, as part of Raven, I get to work across our portfolio of multiple companies. So we have several trials running at any time, and we get to work with those clients. And so now it's like I have 100 pipelines
Right.
versus just one pipeline at a time. And so I think when we talk about patient engagement and the industry as a whole, that's been quite interesting to see what everyone is doing from that lens.
And that's a perfect segue. Okay, so you have been sitting along with all of our other judges. Thank you to everybody in some interesting presentations. We've received a lot of submissions for the Participant Engagement Award. Small companies, large companies, all types of groups, sometimes multiple groups where they submit a project together. And it's an interesting thing to do that because you get to see what is happening as a whole in the participant engagement, enrollment planning, patient recruitment space. So, what are some things that you kind of took away from this year's batch of submissions, all of them worthy? What are some trends that you saw?
Yeah, so first of all, I was really impressed with all of the award submissions that came through. I think it's a really exciting time for our industry, and the submissions really showcase that.
Yep.
A lot of people are investing in patient engagement and understanding how critical it is to the entire industry, not just like if you carve out this role. I think people are really understanding that it's really the premise of clinical development, which I think has been a bit of a shift in perception. One of the big trends that I've personally noticed this year is the integration of AI in
Hmm.
patient engagement. And I think a lot of industries right now are coming around to AI and realizing that it's not going anywhere. And so
Right.
the question becomes, how do we best integrate AI in our profession? And I think for patient engagement, we're at this kind of interesting precipice where all of these different vendors are being created with these novel solutions integrating AI. And for us in engagement, I think the question is like, how do we integrate AI in a way that's meaningful and actually helpful for patients? And I think we're starting to see some that are not so helpful for patients and
Right.
some that could be really helpful for patient engagement. So that's been a big trend that I've been keeping my eyes on.
Yeah. And I would say, even from 1 year ago, when we did this award, to now, it's like a radical shift. Not just that AI is a thing, it is a thing,
Right.
obviously, but how fast it's moving, how much savvier and cleaner some of the new work compared to 12 months ago is. It's like, it's wow, things are moving
Very
way
interesting.
faster than
Yeah.
I even realized. So technology, utilizing AI to improve the experience, to better find patients, whatever it is, right? Okay. What is something else that you saw? We received a lot of submissions and they were all over the map. What is another, if you had to like pull another trend out, what was something else you saw?
So I think in addition to the submissions that we saw, but across the industry, another thing that I'm personally really excited about is I think that people are viewing patients, kind of what I alluded to earlier, in a bit of a different context than they have historically, where they are the end user. And I think that development's finally centering around that idea and almost looking at consumers, patients as more like a consumer brand, like an Apple, for example. And so one of the trends that I've been really keeping an eye on is in commercial, these direct to consumer platforms and programs that have been opening up in the last year. It's really been like 0 to 100.
Mhm.
So like Lilly Direct is a really great example of a program
Right.
that's been rolled out at a massive scale. And has been establishing that relationship directly with the patient and removing the middleman, like PBMs, from all of that. So I think that's really important for two reasons. And one is transparency. Like you
Okay.
log on and you know exactly how much your drug is going to cost, which historically has not been a thing. Like even
Right.
still today, I walk into CVS, I'm like, I have no idea. Like
Right.
this could be
Right.
$25 or $2,000, right? So it's establishing that transparency up front. And then I think the second is that it's really establishing the brand name as the core, which again, historically, like patients haven't really had much of a preference about who the sponsor is of their
No.
drug. And so I'm really interested to see how that how we see that in R&D because I think it's coming and it's slowly been coming. Like I was thinking about this the other day. Our standards guides from even like 10 years ago, our best practice was not to add compensation amount and not to say who's sponsoring the trial. And now it's completely opposite, right? So I
Right.
think we're shifting and heading in a really positive direction there.
Yeah. Okay, that's those are two big things. And I also think one of the this is beyond just like you said, just beyond our submissions, looking at scope, the agendas, and looking at how kind of talks
Yeah,
and stories change. You are seeing that in our submissions and in the agenda. Also, you're seeing some interesting partnerships too. You're seeing you. This is not a partnership, but you're talking about direct to consumer commercial versus R&D. I want to set that aside because that's a bigger I have a follow-up
sure.
question to
Yeah,
that. But there's also within our submissions, there were quite a few groups that were interesting teams, a sponsor, a technology company, and a nonprofit or an advocacy group or a hospital or a rare disease kind of community that has its own population. And those types of things always interest me. I am always interested to see that because sometimes there is a disconnect and not with my scope people because they're in the trenches. They're doing the
right.
work, right? Um, but in general, sometimes we always like I think sometimes we overcomplicate some things. And what you said was we are realizing that the patient is the end user ultimately, right? And I think at Scope, we've been saying that forever. All of my
Yes.
people,
Yeah.
like your old
Right.
job, like
Yeah.
you're the ones that were pounding the table. But if you go back 10 years, your voice was probably a smaller voice at your
Yeah.
large sponsor organization,
And seen
right?
as optional, right?
Yeah,
Patient engagement has historically been seen as like an
good point.
optional nice to have, right? And
Good
I
point.
think that that lens is shifting.
Right. And that's what I'm getting at. I think it's so interesting that some of that it's coming from the outside where you have these people. I had a conversation last week with Neha from Pfizer about like sometimes there is a pilot project. It's a small
Mhm.
project where a Sam or a Neha at your company, whatever it is, you do something and you prove that it's working and it has traction, and then that gets pulled in. So the concept of patient centricity, and these guys are our end users. This is these people, this group, they are why all of this is happening.
Right.
Is something at Scope has been said forever, but Scope is only one segment of these huge R&D and commercial orgs. Okay, so secondly, go further with commercial and its relationship to R&D because I think R&D looks at commercial and sees opportunities for data sharing,
Yes.
for understanding behavior. Is there you look at a lot of companies. Is that chasm hard to bridge? That's one of the keynotes we have at Scope is talking about
Yeah.
better meta affairs, commercial, better working together, R&D back and forth. So what are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
I think in my experience, it's really depended on the organization for how that bridge looks and how interconnected it is. In some instances, I've been able to collaborate really, really closely with commercial. For example, perhaps they're working on priming the market while I'm running a phase 3 study. And so it's
Okay,
like, let's look at efficiencies there and how we
good.
interact with patients within these markets. And so, like, that's fantastic when we can partner on something like that. Other organizations, you're super firewalled. And so it can be really difficult to pull
Yeah.
out and suss out and redundant in a lot of ways or conflicting. So we've had, calls where we say, hey, we noticed you're running Google ads in this space. We're also running Google ads in this space. And it's the same organization with different end goals. And so hopefully some of that will resolve. But I think what's important with the direct to consumer trend and looking at that is that I think it's a signal for R&D across the board, kind of what's to come when we look at those users. But I also think no matter the organization, there's ways to capitalize on both the trends, but also for those in bigger organizations, I'd also encourage them to look at how to engage those patients that are being engaged in the commercial aspect. So,
Right.
for example, if someone is building this relationship with Lilly on that platform, it just as an example, on that platform, now they know the brand name, they trust their medication that's coming from that sponsor. In R&D, how do we then introduce, hey, by the way, we're also working on all this really cool research that you might want to be part of and encourage that life cycle
Yeah.
to grow and that relationship to grow over time, for
Yeah.
example.
Good example. Cool. All right, Sam, we're going to see each other pretty soon. I'm
Yes.
excited.
In
We'll
the
see each
warm
other.
weather. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. In February, Florida is not a bad thing. All right. So thank you to Sam for being here, for being a judge, and for always helping with scope. And this was a good chat. It's good to see you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Okay. See you soon.
All right. Thanks.